Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to today's session, which is Indian Women in International Relations and Sustainability. We have an amazing panel with us, and I would like to have the pleasure to introduce our panel to you. And after that, we'll start the session. So today we have with us Arundhati Pandey, who is, yeah. So Arundhati Pandey is a former development professional working in the sphere of rural agriculture livelihoods and climate change. She is also a part of the World Economic Forum's initiative into Global Shapers community at 20. She was amongst the youngest shaper to be nominated and has been growing since then along with the community. Growing up as a third culture kid, she considers herself fortunate to be able to see diversity in things like cultures and places. She loves music, reading, writing, traveling, and is a student of Indian classical dance Bharatanatyam. Hi Arundhati, I'm glad to host you as a speaker today. Next we have with us is Sulekha Agrawal. Sulekha Agrawal holds a Master's in International Law from the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies, Geneva, and a BLS LLB from Government Law College, Mumbai. Qualified to the bar, she has worked with the International Law Commission, United Nations Environment Programme, and Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, the Kofi Annan Foundation, and several NGOs and national public institutions. Next, we have with us is Swasti Raizada. Swasti is a senior consultant at Deloitte with over 5 years of experience serving energy clients. In the past, she has worked with multilateral donors such as the World Bank, Climate Investment Fund, and regulatory commissions across India as a policy consultant. She holds a Master's of Public Policy from National Law School of India University and is passionate about climate change and sustainability. She has also represented India at multiple international forums, such as the first BRICS Youth Summit and World Festival of Youth and Students. Next we have with us is Vini Sharma. With an educational background in economics, public policy, governance, and sustainable business energy, Vini has been working towards the social and public well-being from past 4 years and has worked with UNDP, Niti Aayog, Ministry of Finance. Vini is convinced that we need more empathy, kindness, and a strive to contribute towards public policy, international affairs, and sustainability. She is determined to do her bit in leaving the world as a better place to live in. Next we have with us is Meghna Vodapalli. Meghna Vodapalli is a purpose-driven professional who currently works within NGO Sahas on a UNICEF-funded project with 2 state governments in India. Her work involves institutionalizing rural solid waste management through SWM policy and implementing end-to-end SWM pilot projects in Telangana. Ms. Vodapalli is passionate about creating a sustainable planet, especially by combining public policy with sustainability in order to protect our natural world and to build an equitable economy. Next we have with us is Titli Thind. Titli Thind is a former airline captain with 13 years of experience and was a part of India's repatriation efforts during the pandemic. During her journey with aviation, experiencing the effects of climate change led to begin her journey with permaculture. She went on to complete a permaculture design course with an emphasis on urban spaces, volunteered as a teacher's assistant for a PDC, and co-founded an eco-stay and community space in Goa. She is now dedicating her time to working on reforestation projects as she studies environmental law and policy through WWF India and the National Law University, Delhi. Next, we have with us Srishti Goyal. With the education in the realm of economics, aspiring to work for the positive discourse on the policy environment and contributing effectively towards the attainment of sustainable development goals. Her areas of interest include international affairs, political economy, climate change, behavioral development, and social development. Yeah, exposing you all to the amazing panelists. We also have our co-moderator, Arpit Chaturvedi, who would like to give you a brief introduction about the session today. Over to you, Arpit.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rashi. And thank you, first of all, for organizing this wonderful session. I must say that, this was Rashi's conception, and through her good offices, we were able to collaborate with the World Economic Forum Bhopal Hub. So I thank the World Economic Forum Bhopal Hub for giving us the space to talk about a very important issue that we're going to cover today. That is the role of Indian women in international relations and sustainability. At Global Policy Insights, which is our think tank, we have set up a forum called the Indian Women in International Relations, or the IWIR, which focuses on promoting the role and contributions of Indian women and women of Indian origins in the fields of international political economy and international relations. The idea being that typically what the stereotype is that this particular field of international relations, security, political economy is seen to be as the domain of the men. And the idea behind this forum is to break such stereotypes. And I'm absolutely glad that we have our very intelligent, very talented fellows from the Global Policy, Diplomacy and Sustainability Fellowship, who are going to be talking about this very important issue, which is the role of Indian women in international relations and sustainable development. They're also going to be sharing about their own experiences as practitioners of public policy, international relations, and sustainability. And they're going to throw some light upon the challenges and the way forward to break the existing glass ceilings and to address some of the structural issues that we have in these fields today. So again, thanks to all of the fellows, and thank you to all of you who are attending this session for taking out the time and discussing this really important issues. Over to the fellows now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Arpit, for the lovely introduction and giving us the background of IWIR. And we would keep on doing these amazing works. Thank you again, Bhopal Hub, Global Shapers Community Bhopal Hub, for coming in collaboration and helping me to organize and host this event. So now I'll invite speakers to give their introductory remarks. So we'll start with Sulekha, and over to you, Sulekha. You can start with your introductory remark, and then we will move on to the next speakers.
The construct within a system, a structure, right? And you can deconstruct it and reconstruct it depending on what you want to achieve at the end of what that structure within which the woman is embedded aims to achieve. And this is actually very relevant and when you look at sustainability, right? So if you look at the classical definition of sustainable development, it has three prongs: environment, society, and economy. And give or take the proportions, economy continues to be the largest subset under which we function. And what we need to realize is within this structure, the construct of women also implies gendered feminist roles. In an economy, a woman is given a specific gendered function, and which traditionally tends to be within the realm of the home. So you see women doing most of the unpaid labor, informal sector, and by mere opposition, you would see men doing what they call the external work, the quote unquote important work. Now, why I bring in this idea of gendered feminist roles within an economy is because in international relations, these roles then tend to shape the international discourse. So for example, you would see how on an international stage, say security dilemmas or statecraft or war tends to be prioritized. They're being discussed not incessantly. And you have really pressing issues. For example, let me take a very contemporary issue that's happening. Violence against women has exponentially increased during the COVID lockdowns, but no one seems to be speaking about it. There's one mandate of the High Commissioner of Human Rights working on violence against women. Agencies dedicated to the work on violence against women are struggling to get resources, funds. And that just goes on to show that the dichotomy is huge. It's just in the way these roles are defined and then how they go on to then frame the structure on an international level. And the whole point behind highlighting this existence of a construct, of a structure, is to then see if the permutations and combinations can actually be adapted in the favor of women. Because whether we like it or not, this continues to define access of international participation or barriers to entry for women. And that is something that must be looked at no matter how high sometimes the abstraction tends to get. So that's it for the side of theory. I won't bore everyone else by delving further into it. But on the topic of inspiring women in international relations, someone I really look up to is Professor Ratna Kapoor. She's a professor at Queen's and Mary College, University of London, and also at IGLP Harvard Law. And she's an international law theorist who really looks at how these structures are involved in furthering goals. So for example, there is a book that I absolutely recommend. It's called Gender, Alterity and Human Rights. I'm going to drop the link in the chat box for the benefit of the audience. It really looks at how human rights have actually been deployed to advance political and cultural interests in the garb of enfranchising all the disenfranchised groups, be it queer people, women, backward classes. So it really delves into the strength of the structures to understand how these things are manipulated to have ulterior motives. And we should not be looking at linear ways of thinking and actually understanding things at a much macro level before we even begin to, take ground level action, which will have effective implementation. So I'll leave it at there, and I really look forward to having a discussion. Thank you.
Absolutely, Sulekha, and I absolutely agree with you on the front that there's not much talk, and more than that, there's not much action on things such as the increasing cases of violence against women, especially during the pandemic, and these are certain things that we need to discuss in forums like these. That it is UN Women is talking about it, various civil society groups are talking about it, but then can we see any real government action, or can we see any real action in our own local surroundings which is addressing something like this, which is even taking not just preventive, but then even remedial actions on the sort of domestic violence which is happening? People get to know about these. So the policy question over here is that, okay, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of statements given by political leaders, by NGO leaders, etc. about it, but then is there even one policy that was implemented in our country that was looking at preventing such cases, or some educational program as well, which was looking at preventing such cases? And those are some of the things that we need to look at. Let me now invite Swasti over. And Swasti, let's talk about what you think has been the contribution of women in international relations and sustainability, and what are some of the great challenges that we're facing.
Thank you, Arpit. Can you hear me?
Yes, Swasti, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining in. I'm really delighted that we have such a huge turnout for this session today, because I believe that if you've gone through the pain of deciding to register for this event and indeed showed up, I consider you as an ally of this topic, and it's such an important topic that we are discussing at hand today. And just to kick this off, I am actually an engineer who turned to policy very early in life. And throughout this journey, I believe that it's been women actually who have inspired me to take the career trajectory that I indeed did. The first woman I think that I was inspired was, of course, my mother. And I want to start that because the way I look at this topic is in a sort of a, when we talk about topics such as women advancement, we need to take a life cycle approach, because at every woman's life, at every stage, there are different barriers. There are different instances when you feel disadvantaged. And if we if we continue to make these piecemeal efforts, as like, for example, what I just briefly touched upon is how can we really put our money where our mouth is, because we need not necessarily be doing that. So in order to do that, we need to take a more life cycle approach towards an issue such as this, which is that as a young female who is just starting off, who's probably had the right education, how can we correct the course at every step, and what will be those necessary interventions that will be required, not just to retain that talent, but also to encourage it. So I'll broadly talk about those challenges and recommendations towards the second half of the session, because I know we have a slot dedicated to it. But before we go towards that, I want to briefly introduce some of the women that I have continuously been inspired, from, and they have been industry stalwarts in their own sense of it. And I'm an engineer who went to policy, and I typically do not tend to find a lot of role models in a career trajectory such as this. So I started off with doing a lot of field work on ground. I was, learning a lot from how clean energy technologies are shaping up in the country. Started with a clean cook stoves program in the rural Rajasthan, went from village to village, trying to understand the story of women, how they can be change makers. And one thing that struck me out was, if you train a woman with a technology solution, she typically tends to transform the entire community, which is something very, very distinct from the way, typically, and this is not to say lesser of other communities, but I think it's just the way women react to certain trainings and certain programs that are directly fed to them. So in my early stages, I was actually fortunate enough to visit a place called Tilonia. For those of you who have never heard of it, it's a really interesting place. It's a model village that has transformed itself into 100% solar electrified village, really back in like the 90s. And it has now become like a hotbed of a training place where women from all over India, from even sub-Saharan African countries, come to Tilonia to train themselves in solar technology, and take that back to their own communities and connect them to the grid, or bring some sort of electrification, which has always been my anchor for what I do today. And I do have to concrete examples, but I really wanted to kick this off with driving down the message that when you train a woman, you actually train a whole community, which is something that we need to keep in mind as we continue to think about some of those interventions that we may plan as policymakers of tomorrow. Moving on, I do have like two examples that I derive inspiration from. One is Dr. Rajeshwari Pillai Rajgopalan. She's also an advisor to IWIR. So I'm not going to read out her entire bio, because I know we have only 3 minutes, and it's actually going to take a lot more than 3 minutes just to talk about the two stalwarts that I want to cover. But she recently actually became a great advocate of increasing representation of women on panels that are critical to policy making, which I found really interesting. She is a stalwart in international relations, and so she came out and shared a personal instance on YouTube, which I think was extremely bold. She was once visiting the National Institute of Advanced Sciences. NIAS is a center within IISc, one of the best places to do cutting edge research. And while she was entering a conference room for a seminar that was being organized for advancement of women, she encountered a professor from IISc who asked her as to what she was doing there, what's her business of being there. And she said that, I'm here in the capacity of representing ORF, which is the place where she works. And she wants to, speak about how we need to increase representation of women in international relations. And the professor actually came back, with a statement saying that, oh, these days it seems like the standards have really fallen, and we are calling people from all sorts of walks of life. And as she said that, I think she basically retaliated with the fact that, I'm sorry, but you cannot continue to speak with me like this. And what I found was very interesting was this very instance where, you know, she holds a PhD in international relations, and I don't think there could be anybody more necessarily qualified than her to speak about the topic at hand. But this kind of microaggression that women face despite being distinguished in their fields is more common than we may think of. And if you're not adequately prepared to handle that, it can become a huge challenge going forward, especially when you rise up in the hierarchy of the organizations that you might be working in. So I wanted to share a personal instance, an anecdote from her life, just to drive home this point that, you know, it need not be that, you know, you're starting off, you might be senior, you might be in fact even sitting at the board, but you will continue to experience these challenges, and it's best to equip yourselves today to, you know, handle such instances when they come to you. In an ideal world, they should not be happening, but if they do, what do you do? The second instance that I want to talk about, the second female leader who I want to speak about today is Ms. Shalini Sinha. She is an interesting person, and I wanted to talk about her on this particular platform because I know this continues to remain a controversial topic in our society even today. She is the Chief CSR Sustainability and Communications Officer at a renewable independent power producer company called Renew Power. For those of you who probably don't know about Renew Power, it's one of India's leading companies in renewables, and they're doing exceptionally good in terms of their contribution to meeting some of the targets that the country has laid down for renewable capacity addition. And in her own role, she has been a champion of women in sustainability, especially the traditional utility business and energy sector within sustainability. And I'll try and contextualize the surroundings and the system, for example, that Sulekha talked about, within which she sits today as the Chief CSR Officer at Renew Power in the second half. But in her capacity today, she's trying to encourage more women to come and contribute to the renewable transition that's happening in India. And in that role, she has really gone ahead and, you know, like spoken very vocally on multiple panels. She's been publishing very actively. She's very active on social media, Twitter included, where she tries and, you know, push this message that we need more women in the sector. And what strikes me most often, and it is extremely disturbing when I read some of these things on social media, and I actually wanted to use this platform to get and crowdsource some of the thoughts that all the panel members in this particular discussion may have, that, you know, most often there are people on social media who come back saying that, you know what, she should not be saying this because she's at an advantageous position herself. For those of you who do not know who Srishti Sinha is, and I hate to do this because I'm completely, you know, I do not like when women are introduced based on their affiliations or their relationships to others. But Srishti Sinha is the daughter-in-law of, Jain Sinha, and so Suman Sinha is the son of Yashwant Sinha, and, you know, it's often said that Suman Sinha is the founder of Renew Power, and Srishti Sinha is in the place where she is because Suman Sinha is the, you know, is the person who founded Renew Power, which I find extremely disturbing. And I think these are things that are so often spoken in our society, and we often tend to, you know, put a label on where women are because of certain positions that they may hold due to their personal relationships or spousal relationships or otherwise, that it becomes a challenge to, you know, overcome that at times. And you need to be extremely bold, extremely brave in speaking truth to power to be able to drive down that message and continue to build your own identity irrespective of who you may be. So I just wanted to you know, use the opportunity to speak about these two examples because I think these are going to be very critical to the second half of the discussion, because some of these topics are extremely controversial and people have, you know, differing opinions. So would love to hear from you as we move on into the second half of the discussion. Thank you. I'll hand it over back to you, Rashmi, with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Swasti. Am I still audible?
Yes, Arpit, you are.
Awesome. So, Swasti, thanks for sharing both of those great profiles of people that can serve as role models for other folks in the fields of IR and sustainability. I'd also encourage if some of our speakers can share either a book or a work or a link about some of these folks that we are speaking about, so that our audience in general gets more educated about the great work that Indian women are doing in the fields of IR and sustainability. But absolutely great points, Swasti, over there, especially Raji in a very, so I'll quickly just conclude my thoughts over here, that I really love the story where you said that, Raji corrected that person who was trying to question her presence at that particular conference. And I think that sort of a confidence and that sort of, just in a way, guarding your dignity is super, super important, as you've pointed out. Cool. So with that, let me just bring Srishti Goyal, Srishti, on board, and let's hear from you, Srishti.
Thank you so much, Arpit. So on the onset of my opening remark, I would just like to reiterate some of the points which were made by Sulekha. I would like to emphasize that sustainability is more than just environment. Unfortunately, most of the times when people talk about sustainability, they do not acknowledge, due to perhaps lack of awareness or forgetfulness, that sustainability comprises of 3 dimensions, and along with environment, it also includes social and economic dimensions. So today I would like to shed some light on Indian women and research related to sustainability majorly. Research in India, unfortunately, is not a well-paid job. Unless you are working with some international organization or the corporate sector, most likely you would be earning peanuts. So while this is irrespective of the gender, the problem arises because men tend to be more assertive than women, and therefore women end up taking these low-paid jobs. To substantiate this further, I would also like to talk about a project that I undertook at UNESCO MGIEP, where I analyzed the economic textbooks of 6 countries, Asian countries, which included India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Singapore, Hong Kong of China. And the objective of the project was to ascertain the presence of concepts related to sustainability, global citizenship, and peace. One of the stark findings that I found about India, where I was analyzing the NCERT textbooks, these are the books that I studied myself in grade 11th and 12th. They were unintuitively propagating gender norms. So while the textbook was talking about gender equality, the pictures were telling a different story altogether. Every time there was someone fetching water, it was a woman. Someone driving a car was a man. Someone selling goods was a man, but someone doing household chores was a woman. I believe when at home we are told that we are not allowed to step out of house to work, and the textbooks tend to reiterate the same notion, a young girl might end up thinking that this is what she's supposed to do. And even when they get opportunities to work in areas of their desire, they happily accept low pay, while men, if not given what they demand, would happily walk away from that job opportunity. Here I would like to talk about Dr. Renu Singh, who is currently the Executive Director of Young Lives India, a trained Montessorian and special educator. I recall once she told me that when she started her career as a special educator, her first earning was 3,000 rupees a month. She has over 26 years of experience in school management, teacher education, policy analysis, and research, both in India and abroad. Previously, she has held the position of Director of School of Rehabilitation Sciences at University of Delhi and the Director of Save the Children India. She has been constantly working towards the reduction of child marriage in India. She's also the member of Jaitley Committee, which was set up by the Government of India in 2020 to revise the age of marriage for girls. One of her studies was even relied upon by the Supreme Court of India in Independent Thought versus Union of India, that read down the then existing exception in IPC that prevented criminalization of rape within child marriage. She strongly believes in the principle of inclusivity and strives to include capable individuals from different sections of the society in her team, with over 80% of her team comprising of women. and supports the motto of "No one left behind." Another such woman making a mark using behavioral science in development is Dr. Neela Saldana. On the face of it, she started off as a regular marketing professional with her bachelor's in economics from St. Xavier's, Mumbai, and MBA from IIM Calcutta. She worked at various multinationals and consulting firms solving the consumer problems. On the lookout for evidence for marketing strategies which she was applying, she undertook her PhD in consumer behavior from the Wharton School. Things started to change when she started questioning why she's not using her newly acquired knowledge for well-being and happiness of people instead of selling soaps. Around this time, she was also introduced to effective altruism, and she volunteered as the social media manager for the Life You Can Save organization while working for the marketing firms which she was engaged in. In 2017, she got a call to set up the Center for Social and Behavioral Change at Ashoka University, and a career in sustainable development began. She went on to use her expertise and years of experience in behavioral insight at Busra Center for Behavioral Economics, Innovation for Poverty Action, among others. One of the current consulting projects she is engaged in is on behavioral change interventions in public health, which is being undertaken in the US, India, Uganda, Mali, and Malawi. Lastly, I would like to talk about Ms. Mugdha Sinha, a career civil servant with over 20 years of wide-ranging experience in governance, public policy making, and international trade negotiations. She was groomed to become a civil servant as early as from grade 5. While over the years, number of women selected for UPSC has increased, the average is still around 24% of the selected candidates. While we have come a long way since Ms. Anna Ranjan Malhotra became the first Indian woman to become an IAS officer, even today we do not find many women in the top bureaucratic positions. Ms. Sinha, being one of the exceptions, holds the post of Secretary to Government at Science and Technology Department of Rajasthan. Previously, she has held the position of Director of Foreign Trade for NAFTA and Latin America regions, and also played a crucial role as a lead negotiator and coordinator for India-Canada CEPA negotiations. I had an opportunity to meet and learn from her in 2016 during one of my international trade lectures at Terry University, and she was one of the reasons why I ended up having a brief stint at civil services preparations. Towards the end, I would like to emphasize that these women come from fairly well affluent families, and these families lived in urban settings and supported their female child to have a career. However, this is not the case always, and if we do not make the necessary corrections in such as our textbooks, we might fail in our endeavor towards gender equality and empowering girls and women. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Srishti. And I think you've made a very important, you've made, two things, 2 points that I can certainly, take away from this conversation. Number one is that sustainability is a, broad topic. Sustainability covers things such as, gender equality, to life on earth, to life underwater, to well-paying jobs. So all of those 17 sustainable development goals are the components that make up sustainability, and there eventually we talk about them, as you rightly pointed out, because we have to manage all of those things if we want to manage any of those things. So that is a point well made, and related to that, what you said, that education is certainly a great part and a very solid pillar of sustainability, and it all starts from the education where I was looking at trying to remember the books in schools that I had, and you'd always find mothers dropping children to the school or working in the kitchen. Those were the graphics that we have all grown up with in our school books, and even though, I'm sure we all can think of certain exceptions, but then majority of the times that stereotyping starts from those school books themselves. Right. And I think, that's one thing that we need to change, absolutely. And for those who are over here who are working on education policy, this is something that we need to recognize. This is something that we need to highlight and call out. at any level that we are working on, we do have the power to absolutely win it. Textbook reform is long overdue. And the thing is that we wait for somebody to bring about that reform. These reforms are they're as distant as a Twitter storm. And I think with the kind of education, knowledge, and the technology that we have, it doesn't really, stop us from getting together. And I would want to propose over here that let's get together and figure out a program where we could be a veritable, formidable pressure group for textbook reforms now. Because if we just wait for the governments to do it, we are reinforcing the whole mental model that the people and the government are different, and the stakes in the system are only with the government. And B, we are also thinking that, we as citizens do not have the right tools or the right power to get this thing done. So thanks for planting that idea over here, Srishti.
I would just like to add that, UNESCO MGIP was undertaking some project with respect to it. They were I know that they were making some textbook content changes in Sikkim, for that matter. And these books that I talked about for India, I studied them in 2011, and they were not, I guess they were published in around 2005. Yeah. And I did this study in 2016, and I checked it last night. The books have still not changed. So I know that some people are working towards it, but definitely this idea of becoming one of the pressure groups would definitely help here.
Certainly. And probably, an outreach plan to the students themselves, that they should speak out about, the kind of books that they are, or the kind of stereotypes that they are being fed. So, programs, maybe we should also organize a program for smaller school children as part of IWIR to sensitize them about things like these. So thanks, Srishti, for that. And let me now invite Arundhati to share her thoughts. So Arundhati, over to you.
Thanks, Arpit. I'd just like to start by saying that I'm all for a very well-balanced panel, but I'm a little amused by seeing, such a panel instead of a manner, your conventional manner. And yeah, I'd actually like to touch a little upon my personal journey, because I think through my own journey, I've seen how gender gap exists in such realms. So I started off when I graduated. Hello?
We can hear you, Arundhati.
Okay. When I started off from college, I wanted to be in space of environmental sustainability and development. But around that time, people had hardly heard about the development sector in general, because the career pathways still are very limited and there's no exposure per se. So your sustainability when it comes to the civil society or say the development sector is still confined to the NGO terminology. That was that. Then when I started working in the sector, I was in space of agricultural livelihoods and wildlife conservation. And my personal role model has always been my boss. She was there, and in my observation in development sector, you would see, I have no.
Now I think Arundhati is frozen.
Yes. Some internet issues maybe. Let's just wait for a minute to...
Yeah, let's just wait for a few seconds for Arundhati to get back.
Yes. By the time I have shared a link on the chat, which is a Telegram channel that we have recently taken the initiative to have discussions on sustainability and SDGs. It's an open channel where everyone can give their thoughts, can invite people to join in. And we're hoping to take something concrete out of that discussion, that space. So I request you all to join the channel by the link. Yeah. Is Aru here by the time? I think so. There's a power cut. I'll just inquire.
Yeah. But Rashi, do you think we should invite another speaker while Arundhati
yes. By the time you can invite another speaker.
Okay. So how about we bring in Meghna over there?
Yeah.
Works. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here again, and thanks Arpit and Rashi for having me. Okay, so I I'm going to start off with firstly thanking all the previous speakers. Your insights and your perspectives on this have been really enriching for me as well. And I'm personally, I'm a professional in the solid waste management space. I work with an NGO called Sahas, and let me just start off with talking about solid waste management and how it's kind of, the women in this space, both that, kind of make an impact in the urban areas and in the rural areas, like two different perspectives on that front. So solid waste management is an all-pervading, it's a seemingly increasing problem. I feel, Indian cities especially are shining examples of how this is a perpetual issue that we keep dealing with. Bangalore, for instance, it used to be called the Garden City, but now over the past few years, unfortunately, it's gotten this name of being called the Garbage City. And incidentally, this is the city where I personally started my journey with in the solid waste management space as well, because it's actually home to several phenomenal women-run organizations that are leading the initiative, for kind of ensuring end-to-end solid waste management and pushing zero waste, lifestyles and zero waste living in general. So, in fact, I like some really, pioneers have stemmed out of this whole garbage city conversation that's going on, because I feel like once the city had gotten its tag, they decided to kind of gain the Garden City tag back. And that's led to, the development of organizations like Daily Dump, which is headed by Poonam Kasturi. She basically uses design to change people's attitudes and behaviors towards waste management. There is Stone Soup and Bare Necessities, both run by women again, Malini and Sair Mansoor. And these are again organizations that have like a wide-ranging, personal care to, lifestyle products that allow people to adopt zero waste living. And in fact, Sair Mansoor is actually like India's Lauren Singer, because literally her waste, the waste that she's generated over 2.5 years literally fits into like a 500 milliliter jar. So she's very iconic. And, these are the kind of women that I really look up to. But that being said, I feel like the OG solid waste management queen would be Wilma Rodriguez, who incidentally happens to be the founder of the organization I work in. But no bias there, because, Wilma is genuinely a pioneer in this space, because she started, she kind of founded the organization Sahas back in the year 2000. And this was when, this was the kind of era where even being associated with waste was something that, it would kind of, it wasn't like a glamorous topic, as it is now, and people would look down upon you for working in the space. Nonetheless, she wanted to tackle India's garbage crisis. So she set up Sahas Zero Waste, because the year 2000 is also the year where the municipal solid waste management rules were actually introduced. And her idea of setting up Sahas was to see how these rules can actually be implemented on ground, because we do have policies, but they never get implemented. So, and again, being a woman in such a socially stigmatized field back then, there was a very high possibility of her having gotten demotivated, especially because local authorities weren't, there was blatant disregard for law. Nobody really wanted proper management of waste. There was very high mismanagement in general, the way it was back in the 90s and before that. Waste management was not given as much importance. But Wilma was truly resilient. I mean, after Sahas, she also set up another sister entity of Sahas called Sahas Zero Waste, which is a private entity. And both these organizations together have come such a long way, because as of today, both of them together, divert around 133 tons of waste away from landfills per day. So I have had the pleasure and privilege of working with Wilma since the year 2018. And again, the sort of organization that she set up right now, Sahas is the senior management at Sahas is completely run by women. We have women heading operations in the north, in the west, in the south, and all of them are change makers and trailblazers in their own rights, because they, they advocate for the right thing to be done at all times. They exhibit tremendous qualities of grit and passion for climate action, and they keep, for young professionals such as myself, who also tend to have eco-anxiety issues, because I mean, climate change is an existential threat. There is a very high, there are days where you do get demotivated. They keep reminding us about why we shouldn't lose faith and, keep pushing forward to fight the battle against climate change. So again, given the work that all these women who've come before me have put in, they've kind of set this beautiful precedent where they make me feel like I'm not a woman in the space of sustainability and waste management. I'm a person that's, passionate to kind of pursue this, this fight. And so that was women in the urban space. But coming to the women in the rural space, and I do have, I do work on a grassroots level project with women in the rural areas, or rather, rural areas in general, to implement end-to-end solid waste management systems. And essentially, the conversation, I mean, for all rural waste management or rural development projects in general, public welfare projects in the rural areas, there is a notion that engaging women and kind of getting them on board is like a silver bullet. It's like the ultimate solution. Every time I speak to a bureaucrat, he just says, get the SHG women, involved. They are the ones that manage homes. Once you train them, your source segregation levels will be 10 on 10. And while that's true, I mean, Swasti, I think, was talking about how getting women trained in certain things does get things going because they are very proactive. But that being said, I do strongly believe, and as in, most of the projects we have also seen that attributing a success or the failure of a project or a policy or any initiative to just women is unfair. Like, it shouldn't be done. Policies should be designed in an inclusive manner. And that is something that we are doing as well while we are drafting the solid waste management policy for rural Telangana, wherein with simple things like Srishti had just said, the illustrations that you see in textbooks. So for instance, the IEC material that we are designing right now, the information communication awareness material that we design, we don't want to, through simple design tactics, we kind of make sure that there are men who are coming and disposing waste into bins like that. These are the kind of images that are depicted. And these are the kind of conversations we have with people, Gram Panchayat functionaries, when we chat with them about the implementation of certain initiatives. So yeah, primarily I mean, I guess in conclusion, what I'm trying to say is that policies, while they should be inclusive, they should also kind of empower the women who are already in the space and kind of help them do what they're doing best. And I do hope that the sort of gender neutrality that I see right now in the space that I am in, because of the women before me, that kind of gets replicated across all industries and sectors. Although it is, it's a pipe dream, it's something that we are working towards, but it might not get realized anytime soon. I do hope that happens very soon, because women deserve to be, they deserve to kind of first look at themselves as professionals rather than as like a woman professional, because I think that's when they can really start focusing on their work and do what they do best. So yeah, that's it from my end. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Meghna. Thanks a lot. With the point that you were saying, that to include women, we are exclusively wanting them to participate. I mean, to bring their inclusivity, we want them to come exclusively, and then we are highlighting that again and again. Also, that one point, Swasti and Srishti, and you even highlighted that, we are showing the narrative in a format where, in the textbooks, we see women is doing certain form of work. So when I was just thinking, it also takes me back to the mythological stories that we have, the culture. So I would just give a reference of an experiment which was done. The way Mahabharata and Ramayana we have studied and we have been taught, if you change the narrative in the opposite context, the other gender felt very powerful. They didn't feel that, so since our childhood, when we grow up and we see and we study all of mythological tales in every religion that we have. So the way, if you just you just design it in a way and tell the public or the children the opposite story, it just changes the entire narrative. So it's not just about textbooks, it's about every arena, every domain that we are living in the society.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Rashi, if I can add just one observation from what Meghna was talking about. One is that, Meghna, thanks for, also in a way, giving a tribute to those women who've been pioneers in the field and who've made, the other generation of women more comfortable, that now they, look at themselves as professionals first and then women professionals second. And, if that's happening, that owes a huge debt to the, women who have come before them. And the second thing that you pointed out is also, a very important nuance to focus on, which is that for any particular project, developmental project, or any sort of a change that we are trying to do on the ground, stereotyping that, okay, this part of the project will only be done by, certain women groups, I think is problematic. And then also this tendency to attribute failure to the beneficiaries themselves is also problematic. So thanks for pointing that out. Back to you, Rashi.
Yeah, Sulekha has also shared a link in the chat box in the framing of narratives. Everybody can go through it. I've already seen and I've gone through it, and I feel that everyone should just have a look. Next, I would like to invite Titli, and yeah, as her background says, she would be falling into a very unconventional stream because she has worked in the industry of aviation, which is again a very male-dominated industry for now. So I would now request Titli to just give her note. Yeah.
Thank you, Rashi and Arpit, for having me here, where I have been in a male-dominated field for a long time. Today, I'm going to focus more on sustainability and international relations. I'd like to thank all of the other women on the panel. Everything you all have said has been so insightful, inspiring, and to the audience for being here, because it's an important conversation, and the more people we can get involved in this conversation, the better. So having been an airline pilot for over 13 years, I've seen weather patterns that we've studied and used to be able to predict slowly disintegrate to chaos. Timely monsoons have become a thing of the past. Floods that have led to death, destruction in most recently Germany, Belgium, and Mumbai. The fires that consume North America. Water protests in Iran. China's heaviest rain in 1,000 years. This is our present. And who knows what the future has in store for us. We've heard warning bells from women from time immemorial. Rachel Carson's iconic Silent Springs, the brave Indian women of the Chippo Movement. They protected the forest with their bodies because they understood and they experienced the adverse implications of disturbing nature's balance. Gaura Devi and the women of the movement won the fight, which led to a policy that restricted the felling of trees for 15 years. Had the ban continued, maybe we wouldn't have seen the 50,000 hectares of deforestation that have occurred in 20 years. Maybe the region could have avoided instability, catastrophic landslides, and floods. There's a similar movement, not as well known as the Chippo movement of 1973. This was led by a brave woman in the 18th century in Rajasthan, Amrita Devi, from the Bishnoi community. She led the community to protect the trees, which then led to the Maharaja of Jodhpur passing a royal decree preventing the cutting of trees in all Bishnoi villages. In 1948, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It stated that everyone, as a human being, is entitled to rights, regardless of race, religion, color, sex, social status, or language. Lakshmi Menon, a lawyer, freedom fighter, Minister of State, and India's delegate to the United Nations, promoted non-discrimination based on sex during the drafting of these rights. In spite of the declaration and Ms. Menon being a champion for women's rights, do we see equality? Women farmers of India seldom acquire land, therefore do not receive subsidies from the government. Women are more likely to live in poverty than men because of economic control, primarily being with a man. In India, women farmers work an average of 3,300 hours in a given crop season. This is in comparison to their male counterparts who work 1,800 hours approximately. But due to lack of land rights and in order to maintain control, they do not get paid by their husbands and their in-laws. Padma Koppala is an inspiring woman that I'd like to bring to the surface, who's a big part of this movement. She's the co-founder of Aranya Agricultural Alternatives in Telangana. It's a permaculture nonprofit. Her organization has mobilized 200,000 farmers using a democratic participatory framework. And she has bridged the gap between governments and marginalized women farmers to own farmland and help them manage their farms using permaculture, which is a conscious systems design that promotes three very, very important ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share. It's clear that the repercussions of climate change disproportionately affect women. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals urge countries to mitigate climate change in Goal 14, and they promote gender equality in Goal 5. These goals need to go hand in hand. We need women to sit at the table and help humanity through this chaos. In the words of Dr. Vandana Shiva, a physicist, environmental activist, eco-feminist, and food sovereignty advocate, I quote, "We are either going to have a future where women lead the way to make peace with the earth, or we are not going to have a human future at all," end quote. Patriarchal systems have suppressed the voice of a woman in so many cultures for far too long. In finding ecological balance, women can lead through a gentler, more nurturing way to heal the earth we as humanity have taken for granted. In my personal journey, I've been inspired by many brave women, and I've had the pleasure of knowing many brave women in my life. One I'd like to make a special mention of, like one of the panelists did before, is my mother, Diksha Thind, an architect, and the pioneer of a beautiful sustainable community in Goa called Saraya. Saraya encapsulates the ideal utopian experience of living in harmony with nature. The homes are made with mud, roofs made with upcycled Tetra Pak sheets, recycled glass bottles and truck windows line the walls, and you live amongst rich biodiversity. But most importantly, it's a space that has begun to evolve. It has life of its own and has harbored a sense of community for people like you and I. People who want to find alternative, more holistic, sustainable ways of living. Was the journey easy for her? Of course not. Did she feel disadvantaged being a woman? If she did, she never let it show. Thank you.
Yeah, Titli, it was just a moving, the way you went, it just moved me. And me, myself being an architect, I could relate a lot to her, to your mother. And when you were also pointing out about the wages, even in architecture, when you get the daily labor wages actually, are varied. So the women is asked to do all the work, which is to, do with lifting of heavy objects, lifting up bricks, lifting up cement, and all the skill work is done by the male counterpart. And they are paid more rather than women but they are doing the heavy work. But, the women is not trained in doing that. Even they learn by seeing of how it is done. I mean, they're not given the chance to do the skilled labor work when it comes to construction and architecture. So yeah, I could relate to it a lot. And also the point that you said on like leading from aviation to the movements that has happened earlier, they are all just examples for us to see of like where are we standing. And in today's time, do we have such movements which are creating history for the other generations to come?
Yeah.
Like, do we have Indian women who are creating histories? We certainly have, but we are not aware of that.
Absolutely. And Rashi, a point very well made that, we have women who have made history and who are making history, but, historians are mostly silent on these matters. And it also falls upon the historians or the journalists of the, of our times to highlight the great work of women who have literally shaped history, as, Titli has pointed out about, women in the Bishnoi community in Rajasthan, or even about Saraya, which is a great feat in entrepreneurship and a very unique sort of model that we don't see very often, not just in India but across the world. So thank you for sharing those examples, Titli.
Thank you, Arpit and Rashi. I actually would like to say also that what Meghna said resonates with me deeply, where our generation has been lucky enough to not think of ourselves as women in the field. We've just, and this is all because of the women that have led the way. So in her case, her boss; in my case, my mother; in all of our cases, I'm sure our mothers. And so we've been privileged, lucky is what I'd like to say.
Yes, surely. Even I feel the same, that we don't have to struggle that much as our older generations have done. So with that note, I would like to invite Arundhati. Arundhati is here again with a proper internet connection.
Thank you, Rashi. Yes, I'm sorry about my internet.
No problem.
I would just keep it short to save the panel's time. I think we're running behind. So I was talking about my own journey. When I started off, people were not aware of development sector as such, and sustainability, as we still keep on discussing, is such a vague term in some sense that many times we just keep on throwing it around without understanding it. And as some of the panelists pointed out, that even now, it's not just limited to the environmental sustainability. Sustainability can be used in a lot of senses, and so important in many others also. But people had not heard about these career pathways, and more so, I think, for women, we are more restricted to the conventional things and conventional expectations of the society per se. So that was that. In development sector, my personal observation was that you have more women at the leadership and organizational roles, and not so much at the field level, which again comes down to the traditional gender roles and the conventional thinking which needs to be tackled. And as I move forward, of course, people have mentioned that undoubtedly the mother would go there, and our bosses, and all the personal examples who have inspired us so far. Even after that, I think after moving away from the development sector and trying to move towards the international relations, I was just touched upon when I was reading on the women in international relations and the pioneers in that, as Viti had mentioned in the very beginning, by C.B. Muthama, because she is the one who fought the discriminatory law, which made women understand that they will quit the job. They will quit the Indian Foreign Services, suppose they get married. And that was blatantly discriminatory. And this change just happened in 1979. So it just makes me think that, we still have a very long way to go. It's not even 50 years yet. And we need to start reforms from the social part with our education at our homes. And at the same time, we also need gender sensitive policies, which would really help bring the gender parity, make more of a closer reality. So, yeah.
Yeah, yes, thanks, Arundhati. And it was short and sweet. And also with this point of development sector, if I talk about in India, in the cities that we live in, which is, not metro cities, but cities like Bhopal, Lucknow, and cities which are now going to become as metro cities, people have really very less knowledge of what development sector is. For them, development sector is just uplifting areas which needs development. Basically, they register it like that. So even this basic term of what development sector what it includes, what international relation is not very verse to the people who are living in these cities. So it needs more light to be thrown upon, and that is how we keep these conversations going. And these conversations were again creating awareness. So with this, I think I am opening the Q&As. Anybody who has any question to ask from any of our panelists may unmute themselves and ask the question. Anybody from the panel can just take over the question.
Sure. And while the audience members are thinking of their questions, one question that I have as an open question to all of the panelists is, about the challenges that they have faced themselves as practitioners of public policy or international relations or students of these fields, sustainability, and not necessarily based on your own experiences, but then also if it is based on your own experiences, if you could talk a little bit more about the fundamental structural challenges that we have in our society, the reasons why we don't see so many of these stories highlighted otherwise, the reasons why there's still discrimination in the workplaces or in the academia, and why historians aren't recording all of those great initiatives, why the journalists are not recording all of those great initiatives. If you could talk a little bit about that, and also if you can throw some light or on the solutions, on the recommendations, that what all can we do to change some of these structural deficiencies that we have right now. I know if any of the panelists, I'm sure we all have stories, so I'd idly like to quickly hear from everyone on the panel, but whoever wants to go first can go first.
I'm happy to go if others don't mind.
Yes, Srishti, definitely.
Sure, Srishti.
Okay, so I think one of the key challenges, Arpit, is something that repetitively came up in our own pieces, I think, which is occupational gendering. And I think there shouldn't be a doubt about we need to solve for that first to begin with, that we need to not segregate jobs based on, this is a man's work, this is a woman's work, and otherwise. I think occupational gendering is definitely one of the ways, and this is exceptionally huge in a society like ours. The numbers prove it. Historically, the policy solutions have proven it. So we definitely need to start from there. But one more thing that I would want to, probably focus on as a challenge is, and this is one of the reasons also why I brought up like Vaishali's example was that we all on the panel also sort of to an extent agreed that as women, we have been privileged enough to, sort of go above and beyond our identities today as professionals, and we identify more as professionals. But I think being privileged is understandable. It's extrinsic or contingent to one's existence. We all probably lie somewhere in the continuum of what I call a privilege spectrum, But what matters is how aware you are of that privilege, and that's been bestowed on you. And today, women are increasingly becoming aware of their choices thanks to, the kind of education we've received. And we are seeing more women entering education, but the choice to drop out often precedes the opportunity to demonstrate one's capability, which I think is a major problem. Most of the women tend to drop out at junior or mid-career levels in India, which I see as a huge problem. And that's where I think some of the biggest interventions from our society, at least in the formal economy, also need to happen, which I think we are still missing out. We still don't have enough young women programs or leadership programs where we can provide some sort of sponsorship or mentorship to women in areas in occupations that have traditionally had extremely low representation, because I think those are interventions without which you cannot change that equation of occupational gendering. And I'd use that example from an industry which I belong to, for example, which is the traditional power or utilities business in India. We still don't have, as latest as 2015, 2019, and 2020, we did not have even a single woman director on the boards of some of these biggest PSUs that lead from the front in terms of ensuring we receive the electricity that we consume today, which I find extremely, extremely problematic. It is the private sector that is still trying to make that change, Vaishali being one of the examples here. But I still think we have a long way to go because we are not able to retain the workforce that is entering even today. And that's the sort of intervention that I would love to, see from policymakers. Have more young leadership program, allow women to advance. On a lighter note, probably start outlawing the question, do you intend to have children in interviews? I really don't understand where that comes from. So I would definitely make that. And these are simple, effective steps, I think, which will, really make a huge difference in the way you feel, or you feel you're not unwelcome in certain spaces and welcome at certain spaces.
No, Swasti, I see it as a very tenable, legal solution to, or just concrete policy mandates to outlaw certain questions like these in job interviews. I think, there can be serious thought about enshrining some of these things into the law. Also, just one question over there. You said something that, thanks to the education we've received, we are, women today are aware of a lot of things. I'm just wondering, and this is just a question and, not an opinion on one side or the other, but then I'm just wondering if we just reflect how much of that awareness can be attributed to the education, the formal education that we have received, vis-a-vis, the education that we've sought out from other sources, including the popular culture. Even though in the pop culture as well, there's a lot of stereotyping, a lot more than the formal education system as well. But then if you just were to divide the proportion of that awareness that we've received from the formal educational system versus outside, where do you think that, how do you think that proportion would look like? Just curious.
I think it's extremely hard to, disconnect the two, because it's a circular cycle in a sense that, you tend to gather some things from the formal system, but then you also try and influence that. For example, if I take my personal example, there are things that I see my organization is doing exceptionally well in terms of women advancement. And those are practices that I would tend to typically borrow and, also bring that into my discussions on a personal front with my family, with my friends. Yeah. So I don't think it's a binary equation. It's a circular loop. It's a feedback loop that works very well when one feeds into the other. But I agree with your point, Arpit, that I think in the pop culture that gendering is in fact even more than probably in professional settings, because and I'm speaking for myself here, so I'm probably not speaking for everyone, because I sit in professional services. It's a much more refined environment that's in that sense, but not all occupations come with that. So
certainly,
I would like to open the floor actually to others on this topic as well.
Sure.
I think I can add that some of us have talked about our mothers or the culture that we grow up in. So that also is kind of becomes a part of your education around you, right? So there are good examples at home, and then there are bad examples where I was fortunate enough that my mom did 2 post-graduations after having 2 children actually, and she had a great career. And so this probably gives us the confidence that you can don't, as somebody pointed out, that I'm not a women professional, I'm just a professional. So and probably if I may add, go a step ahead in terms of outlawing those questions on when are you planning a baby, maybe why not have professional services for childcare at offices and at conferences. I've had a first-hand experience with a colleague, which she was in a dilemma that I might not able to attend that conference, which she was very keen on attending because she had a newborn, and I'm sure there are ways that can be worked out in this way, where this can include consistent and adequate communication with parents, and ample communication in advance, so that they just make it feasible for women to attend more of these conferences, go to work, and not be worried about their children at home. And it may probably be also, contribute to diminish that stigma around families attending conferences, that, oh, they've got their spouses, they've got their children at conferences. And I've heard that. So these are small, things that can, if provided some little support or some Absolutely. Infrastructure in terms of professional childcare, it can help. And we have talked about, having panels, but I still believe that quotas and token opportunities will not be just enough. It is still a crucial way to raise awareness, promote open discussions, and probably recognize that gender bias exists in everything from publishing to panels to having women in mentorship programs. Why not? I think Swasti was mentioning something. So why not a mandate to have a female mentor for a early bird who's just making a career in this field? It just makes women confident, comfortable to have a mentor, to look up to a role model. And it's probably all corporations, organizations, even governments can pitch in. So they'll start to have these probably more representation from women. That's just my 2 cents, but I'm really glad with this whole conversation today. Happy to see everybody's insights and learn from different role models that everybody has talked about.
Certainly, Vidhi, and that's certainly something that we are also, we ensure that during the GPOTS fellowship, we have a fair gender balance. And, we encourage, especially women from the fields of security, or women in the fields of space policy, like we get folks like Shelley Brunswick, etc., who can be the right role models for both men and women, and also shatter all of those stereotypes that if it is about space policy, then you're only going to see this old male scientist who's going to be working on that. So I think that's super important, and that's something that we at the GPOTS Fellowship take a lot of care to ensure. Thanks. So I'm looking forward to hearing more thoughts. I think Titli wants to say something over here. So over to you.
Yeah, hi Arpit. I actually want to go back to the point that Swasti and Vidhi made about not asking the question at the interview panel. It goes even beyond that, because coming from the aviation industry, there are some countries that don't hesitate to put it on your contract and say that if you were to join, then for 3 years, you do not get maternity leave. And, there's no stigma against it, because there've been like world-renowned airlines that I don't want to name here, but like the world's best airline that just started hiring women in 2016, and they hired 2 women and they were cadets. So we don't even know if they've actually made it into the system or not, which is really, really sad. And I think the biggest thing here, I think Sulekha also mentioned it earlier and put a link in the box, is changing the narrative, because we are so okay with this narrative that like literally this Women's Day on the 8th of March, there was a headline article that said women rule the skies because we have 12% women pilots in the country, as opposed to the global average of less than 5%. And we are okay with that. So the narrative is so sad, to begin with, that in order to get to some semblance of parity, the narrative has to first and foremost change. But like you mentioned earlier, not just talking about the challenges, there are a few revolutionary airlines making differences with policies where they are actually giving women understanding that women are the nurturers of the home, and they may need time off on weekends, and therefore their pay could be compensated accordingly, where they're working a little bit less than the men and then therefore getting paid accordingly, but they can take the time off if they need to take care of their kids or whatever it is. And a couple of them are giving you the option of, if you don't get the maternity leave, then you can actually instead work a ground job and get paid anyway doing something else, because you're not allowed to fly from day 1 of pregnancy. So the maternity leave then would be far too long. But coming back to agriculture, I think just a quick reform would have to be something like land rights, because I think I mentioned it during my introduction as well, because I think that's where we're lagging behind. Our inheritance laws changed only in 2005, and they're so skewed because up until then, it was only the men that got property. So I think it's only 12% of Indian women that actually own property, which means that far less of them are farmers, and therefore far less of them have control of any of the economics of the farm. And we've got some 75% women farmers. So the statistics are so skewed. So I think there's a big narrative change that's needed. There's a holistic policy change that's needed, you know. Yeah, but I'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts.
Yeah, totally. I mean, whatever you have highlighted is correct, and we need such kind of reforms and changes also at the policy level, also at the individual level too. I mean, I know even I know when I interviewed for an architect job in the beginning when I was starting my career, there was an office where I went in and they asked me, "What is your age?" So I was like, "Why they're asking me?" So they calculated the number of years that, you know, in an Indian family, the girls are supposed to get married. And then he said, "Oh, I think so. So then he said that, no, we cannot take you." So I just asked them, well, what's the reason for that? So they're like, "You will not be working with us for more than 3 years, you know, because you'll get married and you will not be getting married in the city. If you can give an agreement saying that you would be getting married in the same city and not planning to get married in the next 3 years." I'm like, oh my God. And I would not name that architect. He's a very famous and a very good architect who's doing great work in India, government, non-government projects. So just being exposed to such experiences also, you know, give you a kind of, I mean, you feel at times helpless that, you know, I mean, who to complain, what to say, how to say. So, I mean, you just keep on thinking that, you know, when you go to the problem, it is not just in one loop. It goes to loop to loop to loop. You're not able to go to that point where exactly it has started. Yes. So now with that point, Sulekha had something to add on. So I would now ask Sulekha to add on to the thoughts that she's holding up for now. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Rashi. Yes, I've had a lot of thoughts and observations I would actually like to share. But just coming back to skewed narratives for a brief second and to answer someone's question from the chat box.
Yes.
In my understanding and my reading of what has happened post the financial crisis, there has again been a skewed narrative. So for example, if you see at the level of international relations, at the level of UN or international organizations, you see an extreme growth and spurt in affirmative action. So for example, UN would have a certain proportion of their employee hiring set to hire females, right? Or other gendered people or people identify otherwise. But the fact remains, we remain in an economic narrative, and at the ground level, things are just getting worse. So that's about skewed narrative. So at the face of it, it may appear that opportunities are increasing, but if you pan it out and if you look across statistics and if you look across different demographics, it doesn't seem very promising when it comes to women participation because of increasing economic hardships, increasing instances of extreme weather events. Women tend to continue to be really affected in their participation. And so I had this observation because a lot of women that were referred to, we were referring that, oh, well, the female child it's a privilege. The female child was allowed to have an education. And a colleague of mine made a very interesting observation the other day. And he asked whether privilege is a subset of patriarchy. Because I can speak from my personal experience. My agency is somewhat skewed in this narrative because the patriarch in my family agrees to provide me the opportunities. I can go ahead. I can capture the skies, if you will. But the moment he pulls back the patriarchy plug, I don't know where I stand. And that's where I am not very sure about agency in general of women within this structural narrative and international relations in general. And maybe that's not I don't have a solution. And I think Vidhi mentioned about, token representation of having reservations not working. I think it's precisely that. Just by putting a woman in a panel is not going to ensure that women are going to get equal amount of representation. You could have all women and still have them as toxic feminists and nothing would change. So the only solution that comes to mind is building allies. And unfortunately, every feminist talk must begin with a man. And that's a thought I would like to leave really the panelists, the other panelists and the audience with. And I just really look forward to thoughts and questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sulekha. I mean, yeah, all these things that we're discussing today will leave us to a lot of food for thought, actually. Thinking on, and after all these discussions, whenever we have discussions which is focused on women participation in any of the domain, I don't know, being like personally being a woman, I feel a little bit, off that, there is so many problems that I can see. There are a little bit of few solutions also that I think can change the entire situation, can change the entire narrative. But then, you do not know how to implement that, how to bring that in action. So there's also a question by one of the attendees, and he says that in the personal experience of the panelists, has there been any perceivable change in past 1 to 5 years, though particularly post the 2008 financial crisis, in the opportunities available to women in the field of international relations and sustainability? So again, I mean, that's a question for open to you all, as I do not belong to this domain, so I have a very little idea of answering to this question. And as Srishti said that she wants to go next, she can also talk about this question a bit. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure if I can talk about this because it talks about the 2008 financial crisis. I was actually a student in school back then, and I did not have that kind of an experience to make a comment as to what were the situations back then. And somebody with more experience would definitely be a better person to talk about it. Having said that, I have quite a few thoughts on everything that has been said so far. So I guess Swasti mentioned about the women not being able to go beyond the mid-level careers. And that got me thinking that, it is, as a lot of you also talked about, how having a child makes a difference in all these matters. And actually, it is not just the mother having a child, right? It is also the father having a child. So I think the society works in a manner that if there's a child, then it has to be taken care of by the mother and not the father. If we start having paternity leaves, I'm not sure there, again, a pro and con to it, that men are going to go on leave and not take care of the child. So you need to have a supportive partner in that case, I would say. And it was mentioned that there is a need for mentorship programs for young professionals. I think there are quite a few mentorship programs going on for young professionals. And of course, GPOD's fellowship is an amazing example to that bit. However, I think there's a need for mentorship for mid-career professionals once a woman is out of work because she was bearing a child and because she did not have an amazing and supportive family. So she was out of work for a significant amount of time. I guess Tata has something on those lines, but definitely more mentorship programs would help in this regard. There was a question posed by Arpit when he talked about whether it is the formal education or the other settings. I would like to comment that it is definitely not the formal education that we are priding ourselves with, because okay, so if all the women that at least I read about, all those women were coming from an urban setting. They had an amazing, peers. They had peers who could support them and who were giving them more information than just the formal education. If they were coming from a village setting, I don't think that they would have been able to do whatever they have been able to do. And I hold a contrary view to the panelists when they say that they see themselves as just another professional, because to be very honest, I do not see myself as just another professional. I do see myself as a woman professional, because I have gone through a lot of things to be where I am today. And as some people have their mothers who did their education, completed their education even after they bore a child or two, it was not the same case with me. I did have a supportive mother, and that is why I am where I am. However, it took a long time to get my parents on board, to make them understand what I want in life. And I come from a business family background. They don't understand half of the things that I want to do in life. So I definitely feel like I am another woman professional, and not like I am just another professional in that sense. And talking about the solutions, I can talk about it in a very individual manner, not a policy level one, but I can talk to the women in the sense that they should be very honest to their parents because the thing is that our parents want the best for us and we want the best for us. The only difference is their best and our best do not reconcile because of, again, the generational gap, right? So what you can do is be brutally truthful. That is what I can suggest you, because that is what I have done. I just tell them that this is what I want and not just leave it there, because there's going to be a lot of friction. So you have to, keep on the momentum of that communication. And there was something that once one of my teachers mentioned to me. She said that whatever you do in your life, you can achieve that. Whatever you want to do in your life, you can achieve that, provided you have at least one of your parents on board with that idea. So I would just elaborate it, extend it a little more. And I would like to add that have somebody from your family on board, and maybe not just your parents, because in my case, at times I just had one of my siblings on board and that just did wonders for me. So having one person in your family on board is going to go a long way. So I guess this is how at least we women can start moving towards where we want to go. And I guess that would be it for me.
Yeah, to add on, Srishti, with that one person should also have the ability to undergo what you are, or like what the person itself, the girl itself is undergoing. Because, when people see that this, and the family sees that, it's not affecting her. So then the person who is supporting, they're going to target that person, So that person has to be strong enough to stand by your side, by our side, and, take all that thing that is coming from outside. And personally, I also feel that, women in particular have to be very firm about what they want to do, how they want to do. And that is I know that is their right, basically. But again, we have to fight for it. I mean, so I would just share a personal experience. I'm getting married next year. And when I was talking, thank you so much. So the person who I'm getting married to is my childhood friend again. So I told him, that I want to go for my master's. I would do my PhD also. So what is your thought, before we were in that conversation of, getting hitched? So I just asked him that, what is your thought with this thing that, I want to go for my master's, I want to go for my PhD. So he said very, very diplomatically, very nicely that you can go, I don't mind. So I'm like, will you not come along with me if I'm going outside? So he said, I'll have to see. So then I said that if you were saying this, just imagine if you were going somewhere out, you would have wanted me without even considering that, if I want to move or not. I mean, 60% of your mind would be, would be saying that, okay, she should come with me, or 40% you would be thinking that she should stay with my parents, something like that. So I'm like, very straight away, you would have wanted that. So why is this discrepancy is there that, when I'm going out, why you're not? So then he understood it. He said that I have never thought in that manner. So if I would say that, and he was very genuine to me when he was answering this. So he was like, I've never thought in this manner. And he took some time, thought over it, and then he gave me a very good answer. So I also understood that, even the male counterparts that exist in the society, they are not in a position to think over this, as in they're never exposed to such questions. They never give a thought on the basic things, which makes a difference, which makes a very big difference. So the other person should encourage them. Like if they haven't thought over it, have not been aware about that, I mean, they can definitely give a thought over it now, if not in the past. So yeah, so all these changes, all these things start from yourself, from myself, from themselves. Rather than making policies, then the policy will take next 10 years to get implemented, and then you have to monitor if it's getting implemented properly or not. Then if the monetization is not good, then you have to have some another policy that ensures that it is being monitored in all the spaces.
Right.
So yeah. So with this, I would like another speaker to say if they want to add on to what Srishti has said. And obviously people coming from business families who are not exposed to a lot of fields outside there, not exposed to a lot of, knowledge of women working, going out. They have different set of challenges. And I completely empathize with every person out there. And even I would say that I'm a woman professional, not just another professional. Definitely. So anybody who wants to just add on this thought?
I think everyone spoke about mentorship, but we also need to mainstream, because we all spoke about our role models. We have to mainstream the role models. We need not make the distinction that male role model, female role model. They just need to be role models, be it in the education system, be at the informal setting, but we have to like mainstream them. I think that would, because I remember reading one of the comic books, I think, was it something from Amar Chitrakatha a few years ago, and they had this whole publication of like Indian queens, and I thought about sharing it with all my nephews. So I think that the role models need to be mainstreamed.
Yes. I would now ask Meghna. She wants to share some of her thoughts. Yeah, Meghna. Please go ahead. Yeah.
So we've spoken about how at an individual level we can bring about some changes, how things can happen at a policy level. But I feel like the important thing to address here is also what can happen at the organizational level in terms of the organizational culture and the values that the organization basically represents. And again, I mean, here I'd like to take again Sahas's example, because there are several, working moms who are my colleagues, whom I've seen, like the team kind of makes space for them in the sense that, so I can take my own reporting manager's example, for instance. We read about how, during the lockdown, as it is, we were working from home, there was no work-life balance. In the start, especially, we were doing almost 8 to 10 hours of work in most of the corporate companies, at least. And the same was happening with us as well. In addition to that, as mothers, people running the households, they had to take care of their children and do the chores and everything. So again, this was starting to take a toll on my reporting manager's mental health. And this is where the organizational culture bit comes in, because we have people, we have members in the teams, we have our own reporting managers, our super bosses who understand that these are things that we have to deal with at home. Like, these women have to deal with at home, and they kind of don't expect, strict timelines, deadlines to be met and things like that. So the organizational culture is very important. And another example would be that recently one of my colleagues had a baby, and obviously she was an operations manager earlier, and that was very field intensive and things like that. But the minute she kind of got in, after she got back from the maternity leave, they moved her to a desk job, because that's what she was more comfortable with. So that is where, the flexibility for your employees, the kind of just how you treat them at work, because they have certain things that they come with. There are certain responsibilities that they come with. That is really important. So I feel like that is where that distinction also comes in, where you're enabling them to feel more like professionals, rather than, oh my God, I have this thing to deal with at home. As soon as I get back home, I have to cook for my children or whatever. So yeah, organizational policies are also important.
Yes. So basically, when you say that, when you say that you are a unit, there's another circle around you, which is your family. Then there's another circle around you, which is your community. And there's another circle around you, which is your organization or the larger community. Then comes, so you need change in every of those circles. Now, how do you go about it is what, you start from a point and then you make tangents here and there. It depends, like which is more available and at that point of more feasible. And that is what is required. One cannot just wait for that one point. No, this time will come, the point will come, and at that point of time, we'll start thinking or making such contributions or making change. I mean, it is true for, climate change and also sustainability. I mean, you cannot just wait for that one point. It is true for women participation, role of women in leadership, role of women in diplomacy, role of women in IR, sustainability. So with this thought, I would, there is just 8 minutes left and the meeting will end at 8 minutes. Anybody who wants to add on any of their thought, even anyone from the audience can, unmute themselves, can add on to whatever they have, like in this 2 hours of time, they have developed a thought process or a thought or any note that they want to contribute to. And I've been seeing in the chat box, there are so many people participating and, giving their thoughts and supporting of what the speakers are saying, which is really wonderful. I mean, even just participating and, telling their thought process is what is creating awareness all around. So yeah, I would like to thank all the speakers and would again ask if anybody wants to add on to this point, to this note of where are we going, and they're just sharing their ending thoughts.
Rashi, I would want to add to something that Meghna just mentioned, which I think is becoming increasingly another form of tokenism in organizations. I completely understand what Meghna mentioned, and that's very essential and critical. But maternity leaves need not necessarily allow for advancement. It's definitely a must and a necessity that organizations must have, but it's also important to always acknowledge the choice of women as to what their next step in their career is going to be when they return from a maternity leave, which organizations typically tend to either take for granted, or they are not consciously taking an action around it. We see a lot of women taking a maternity leave but returning to a different role, because that's the perception of the employer based on what she might be comfortable with, rather than them going around and asking the employee directly as to what you might be comfortable with. So I think that's a very nuanced equation, but we also need to make sure that that balance is struck when a woman returns to work as to what she is more comfortable choosing, and rather than the employer making a decision on her behalf, which leads to a lot of tokenism then. So it's a very interesting point what Meghna raised, and I just wanted to call that out as well, that these are also small things that do go a long way, because that then becomes a reason for you to drop out, because you may not enjoy the new role. You definitely feel loyal to your employer, but you do not feel as much empowered in the new role that you might be taking up, and you might also be you might be displaced from what you were doing earlier. So it then becomes a major problem. And it's not just maternity leave. I've seen that happening to women post-marriage, post things changing at personal levels, you needing to take care of a terminally ill patient at home, things like that. So I think that conversation needs to start having that conversation, as Arundhati mentioned, needs to be mainstreamed as to what is going on in your personal life. Is there something different that you would want at your work? And having that on a regular basis, because that's the note, for example, that I started on. It's a life cycle approach. You cannot have this one piecemeal intervention and, provide that platform and then forget about it, because that's not how it essentially works when it comes to designing those interventions for women advancement. So just wanted to add that out and call that out as well as we were discussing this one topic further. So
I'd actually like to jump in here and add to, if no one else wants to say anything, to what Srishti and Meghna just said. Just harboring that open communication in an organization, like both of you reiterated, is so important. And I feel also being women, there are so many taboos associated with things that are part of our lives, maternity leave being one, menstruation being another. And I feel these taboos are things that aren't spoken about in workspaces, of course, especially in a country like India, but they do play a role. And there have been talks of policy changes in an airline in India, in fact, where they're planning on actually giving you 1 or 2 days of menstruation leave for the month, where you can just call in and say, hey, I can't come to work today. Because if you're in a safety related job, you're a doctor, you're a surgeon, you're a pilot, there's just so many of them where you need to be aware and, with it every single moment on the job. And you can't be there in pain or cramping or needing to take medication in order to cope for those 2 days, only because of the stigma attached to it. So harboring that sense of community in the workspace is so important. But also coming back to tokenism, I feel for any woman who has gotten to where she's gotten because of tokenism, help all the other women out there, just do your bit, because I feel that goes such a long way. Even though we think of it as, oh my God, we don't want a quota system and we don't want tokenism, right now we should just take anything we can get, because from there comes that cascading effect, and this goes back, I mentioned the book in the chat as well, to this amazing book about the kingdom of Travancore, which is now present-day Kerala, and how it used to be a matriarchal society. And there was a woman who ran the kingdom. And because she ran the kingdom, she put into place the first woman in legislation, the first woman as head of health. And they thought about things like midwives and, you know, things that if there was a man in space, in the space would have never thought about. So yes, it was tokenism to begin with, but then it cascaded into education and women, you know, going out there and working. And she was so forward in like the 1920s, where she actually had a system where she had an unemployment force, which checked that, okay, you were educated, but then what happened to you? Did you actually get a job? So I think having those systems in place, those checks and balances in place, and taking whatever we get, honestly, like take it, roll with it, and do the best job you can do, and kind of get more women on board to make this whole revolution happen is what is my 2 bits.
Yeah, I think so. With that note, we would like to end the session now because it's 5:58 and we have been discussing for the past 2 hours. And I would just thank you to all the speakers, to all the people who are attending here, to Arpit, to Shivendra, to GPOTS, to Global Shaper Community, Bhopal, to IWIR, to host this session and give me the opportunity to come up with idea to host this wonderful panel discussion. With just an ending remark, I would just like to say, you know, we also need programs and initiatives like such sessions, such workshops happening. Like we are capable of doing that. If not giving the responsibility to others, to the government, to our organizations, even we are capable of raising awareness, forming small organizations to do the same. And GPOTS, I think, so is a very, very open and very inclusive platform. It's not just about the fellowship, it's about the entire GPOTS community that we have, and we keep on holding such sessions which, you know, spreads awareness about different domains, different issues that are there in the society. Even again, Bhopal Shapers, like Global Shapers Community Bhopal. Global Shapers Community in general, I would say, is working towards change and for SDGs, which is again an initiative by WEF. So again, being a part of such organizations, giving your contribution makes a big difference. So with that, I would like to end the session and would encourage everyone to, you know, do their bit, do whatever they can. As Lee said, you know, it's a cascading effect. You start from a point and it just cascades over and over. So with that note, I would like to end the session. And thank you so much for joining in, all lovely ladies and every other attendee here. Thanks a lot, Arpit. I think so he's not here now. He is having a parkat. And we'll again connect together with some of the other topic very soon, talking about not just Indian women, but again, women participation in different arenas and how to, you know, change the situation, how to bring change and also execute whatever we thought today. We thought a lot of things, we discussed a lot of things today, but how to execute them is an issue, is a challenge that we should all brainstorm and work together. So yeah, anything, if anybody wants to just contribute here, can say, and then I would end the session. Any one sentence. Okay, I would invite all the speakers to say one sentence and just as an ending note, just one sentence, but whatever comes to their mind.
I think this was really inspiring. Thank you so much, Rashi, for organizing it, and GPOTS and Global Shapers Community Bhopal Hub. And as one of our GPOTS mentor, Ishan would say that I'm just like making a cheap plug-in here for the Global Shapers Community Bhopal Hub. I think because one of our aims is to bring voices of young people at the table, it is also very important to, you know, bring the women at the table. Yeah. So I think we all are committed to doing that, and we are doing that. So I'm really glad. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aru.
I would just say that if you're a young woman working in India, be bold, ask all the difficult questions and fight for your rights.
Thank you so much, Swasti.
Don't get bogged down by what you see around.
Yes.
I would just like to thank you for having me with such an esteemed panel of women who have done such amazing work themselves and talked about some really inspiring women. Today we learned really a lot, and definitely there's a long way to go. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Srishti.
Same, Rashi, I'd like to thank you for having me here. Just being on the panel with all of you amazing women, it's been very, very, very inspiring. So thank you for that. And on an ending note, we're very far from parity, but we're getting there. We should have hope.
We are getting there. Actually, we are getting there. Yeah.
Thanks, Rashi, and thanks to all the women on the panel, and thanks to all the participants. It was a lovely experience, and yeah, just again, reiterating that I learned so much from the rest of you today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We should stay connected and kind of keep having this conversation for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thanks, Rashi.
Thanks a lot, Meghna.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Okay, bye-bye. Have a lovely evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.